In the context of transformation, there is this idea that certain things can be transmitted from one being or one consciousness to another consciousness, and that can activate, trigger changes within a person. So in fact, this transmission is nothing, it's happening all the time, right? I mean, when a mother is with a child, there's a lot of transmission happening there, right? And it's not like she's saying everything. It's being transmitted. It's like nothing has to be said. And so also when you're with a friend or in any number of situations, there's transmission. There's a sharing of energy, which is non-verbal, and which is much more than speech or any kind of formal communication, like through facial expressions and so on. In the case of spiritual transmission, we could talk about all kinds of things there, and I'll just say that there is many levels of that. So there's energy that can be transmitted, and that can be helpful. To me, there's two other transmissions which are rarely talked about and maybe not seen as often, which is light transmission and consciousness transmission. And you can see these relate to different aspects of our own being. So when you go from the physical orientation to a non-physical, which is in spirituality, you are stepping into something much more than physical. So in the non-physical, as you can see, energetic aspect is the first big thing. And if you were to look at the human race as a whole, that's a big deal right now for people who get into spirituality, because that's the first big aha. It's like, whoa, there's this thing called energy. Can you believe it? Can you feel it? Ooh, I can feel it. It's all like about energy. So that's where a lot of the energy transmission has been talked about as energy transmission. But an order of magnitude more powerful is light transmission, because light is more fundamental. Anytime you go into something more fundamental, you're dealing with serious stuff, because it affects everything beyond it. So light transmission is that, which is seldom seen, for good reason, because most people are just barely catching up with energy transmission. Light is like, they're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. So we are at that stage in our collective evolution where light is like, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, that feeling. And then there's consciousness transmission, which is the consciousness of a being that knows essence, can directly be accessed and felt. And when it's done, it becomes our own realization. It's like their realization is our realization, just like that. That's consciousness transmission. And so there's a lot of things which this is just the high level layout of what transmission is. And each level up is way more fundamental, way more powerful. But a lot has to happen for that to really transpire. It's one simple metaphor I would say is, let's say we're all thirsty, we want water, and it starts raining. And we could, number one, we could say, I'm really thirsty and I really like rain, but I'm not getting any rain. I'm not getting water to quench my thirst. So we can just be sitting in a library kind of mentality. We're just thinking. Then we can talk about the qualities of water and where it comes from and the water cycle, but we're thirsty. Okay, so this is purely an intellectual quest at that point. And no matter how good you get, you don't have one drop of water, which is very tragic. If, on the other hand, somebody who doesn't know anything about consciousness, philosophy, nothing, but they step out into the rain, they're going to get some drops at least. Okay, so this fundamental thing you have to see is very important in transmission. For transmission to occur, no amount of intellectual knowledge is of any use whatsoever. It has to be stepping into it. And there is something about it. When you feel the water, you don't have to talk about it a lot. You know it. This is water. And I'm feeling my thirst is quenched. So then if we were to take that a step further, if we have some sort of container, even if it's just the palms, you can collect water, right? So if you have this sense of openness, receptivity, no knowledge, but just openness and receptivity, you're going to get a lot more. Rest just like that, right? Also, of course, you step out, you hold out your hands, you get a lot. And now, you have to be careful, because if your hand is full of leaks, the water will leak out. You got to be able to hold that water, right? You got to be humble enough to receive it, hold it, and make it your own. Then you could quench your thirst deeper and deeper. So these are some basic things going on in this metaphor, but if you get it, that's what's important to really understand with transmission. It's not about technical details. It's really about these fundamental qualities of humility, because humility, the more humble you are, the more you can hold. It's like you have a bigger bowl, you can hold more humility. Now, if you have these two things happening, there's resonance and there's attunement. It's as if there's a bigger pipe. The pipe is the pipe which is through which the transmission is being carried. And if that pipe is bigger, then a lot more transmission happens. So that is a piece which one can pay attention to. If one wants to get more of the transmission. In fact, even stepping back a little bit, I've talked about, this journey of transformation. There's various tools, and there's so many techniques, and there's letting go and all that. All that I put in one bucket, as these are powerful, useful tools and techniques and a framework to understand it. The next level is light. When you work with light, it's a whole different thing. Then there's transmission, which is yet another category which can catapult you into some completely arbitrarily high state instantaneously. So it is a very powerful in its own category, which cannot be quite put down as a simple set of do this, don't do that. But the reason I'm mentioning is just to highlight how important that is. In fact, as somebody evolves, they naturally go through this progression. They'll naturally go from bumping their head against hard objects, slowly learning, then becoming conscious and having a conscious journey of transformation. That's pretty darn good already. 2, working with things like light. 2, transmission, where you directly imbibe higher consciousness from another source of higher consciousness. That is actually, if you ask me, that's as good as it gets. So these are like, but if you just take some random person, they just can't go there. They have to kind of build up. Part of it is they got to purify their consciousness. I talked about how much can you hold. You can't hold much if you don't have any purity of consciousness. So you have to do the work ultimately, but once you're there, it can completely, dramatically change things very fast. But you can't really cheat the system, of course. This is not cheating the system. You still have to do your stuff. The more somebody has got that purity of purpose and the singularity of purpose, that sets you up for reception. So if somebody shows up and they've got, I want to travel the world and I want to, build a successful company, I want to do this, I want to do that, and by the way, I also want to be spiritually successful, whatever that is. Okay. This is not unusual at all, actually. This is basically, they are putting spirituality as just another one thing that they want to accomplish. That is basically not understanding consciousness. Consciousness is the only thing there is, and the only thing that is ultimately worthwhile. And it supersedes everything. It's not just one other thing you bolt onto your life to make it very interesting. That overtakes everything and supersedes everything. So if somebody puts it in that kind of thing, they're just not ready for it. They just don't even understand it. But as somebody does understand it, it really becomes front and center. It's really the only game in town. Everything else is just really cheap entertainment. There's really nothing else going on. And so the reason I'm saying that is somebody who's reached that point knows that spiritual transmission. You can't just go there. You have built up to that, and you know it, and you have this singular commitment, unwavering focus, receptivity, and then it just happens. So it's actually orchestrated by infinity. It's not a person transmitting to another person. It's something bigger, especially the consciousness level stuff. It's much more like the universe wants you to have it, and they're going to use this other person to make sure you get it. It's much more big picture stuff. It's nobody, one guy doing anything. When you choose light, life becomes increasingly joyful, purposeful, and inspired. I invite you to join me to explore the realms of light, the infinite possibilities that light offers.